At 32, my father ridiculed my career as a consultant, but when his struggling company was bought by mine, he understood his error. His son had rescued him. Sometimes life throws you a curveball so unbelievable, so intensely satisfying, that you just have to sit back and wonder, how did I get here? What if the very man who consistently belittled your dreams, who mocked your entire career choice, suddenly found his own world in your hands? And what if that man was your own father? I was 32. I'd built an empire from nothing, but you wouldn't know it listening to my dad. It was Thanksgiving, and the air was already thick with the scent of turkey and unspoken tensions. 32 years old, my father, James Parker, boomed across the table, his words cutting through the usual holiday chatter like a carving knife. Still chasing fantasies. The whole table went silent. That awkward, suffocating quiet where you don't know whether to laugh nervously or just stare at your plate. When are you going to get a real job, Ethan? I slowly looked up from my turkey and stuffing. Dad was at the head of the table, like some grizzled king on his throne. 60 years old, hands rough and weathered from 35 years of construction. He was literally wielding a fork like a weapon, pointing it right at me. Construction, he declared, that's a real job. Look at your brothers. Chris is a foreman with 15 guys under him. Michael oversees 3 job sites. But you, he actually laughed. A dismissive, derisive laugh. What are you even doing? Consultant? That's not a job. That's just a fancy term for jobless. My uncles, John and David, shifted uncomfortably. My mom, Linda, just stared at her plate, knuckles white around her fork. Even my brothers, Chris and Michael, exchanged glances. Chris even smirked, but Michael at least had the decency to look a little sorry. Aunt Sarah tried to lighten the mood. Linda, the turkey is amazing, truly. But Dad wasn't having it. He leaned forward, doubling down. 32 years old. When I was 32, I had 2 kids, and I owned a home. I was building things. Real things. Buildings, structures, stuff you could actually touch. But Ethan, he sneered. Ethan sits in coffee shops with his laptop, pretending to be a businessman. Uncle John chuckled. Aunt Sarah's husband, Charles, snorted into his wine glass. Everyone was looking at me now, waiting for me to defend myself, or just take it like I always did. I just smiled, took a slow sip of wine, then carefully set my glass down. You know what, Dad? I said, my voice soft, almost a whisper. You're absolutely right. I'm clearly not doing serious work at all. He didn't get the sarcasm. He never did. He slammed his hand on the table. See? The boy admits it. Maybe there's hope for you yet. More laughs. Chris, is your company hiring? Maybe we can find Ethan a job as a laborer. Start from the bottom. Work your way up like a real man. More booming laughter. I glanced at my watch. 7:03 p.m. 4 minutes. What none of them knew, was that I had spent the last 6 years building something from nothing. I started in a tiny Seattle studio apartment, a beat-up laptop, ramen noodles, and a burning ambition. I was building software to optimize supply chain logistics for construction companies. My first client? A small contractor from Portland. He paid me $600. It saved him $40,000 in the first year alone. Word spread. Within 20 months, I had 26 clients. For years in offices in 4 cities, 38 employees. And within 6 years, I had the leading construction logistics consulting business on the West Coast. Last year, I sold it to Stratton Global Industries for $50 million. I didn't tell my family. I knew this moment would come. I knew Dad would eventually go too far, mock me so publicly that it would finally break something inside me. And I had been preparing. Tell us what you do again, Ethan, Uncle David asked, a smug grin on his face. Is it synergy? Disruption? One of those words. Strategic consulting, I replied, my voice even steady. Dad scoffed. Supply chain optimization, process improvement, digital transformation, translation, nothing. He does absolutely nothing. Chris chimed in. Come on, Dad, give him some credit. He probably makes PowerPoint presentations. That's something. Dad just went on, oblivious. Men built with their hands. We didn't need computers to tell us how to do our jobs. We just did them. I looked at Mom. Her lips were a thin, hard line. She'd heard this speech 1,000 times. Hell, I'd heard this speech 1,000 times. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every family gathering for the past 6 years. But this year was different. For months ago, I discovered something. My father's construction company, Parker and Sons Construction, the company he'd dedicated his life to, his pride and joy, it was failing.
Badly.
They'd lost 2 major contracts because competitors used superior project management tools. They were over budget on 3 different jobs due to messed up logistics. They were bleeding money. And guess what? The company had been acquired by Stratton Global Industries, the same corporation that had bought my consulting firm.
And now?
I was the chief strategy officer, with ownership, a corner office, and decision-making power over all divisions in North America. My dad had no idea. He didn't know his firm had been acquired 7 months ago. He just grumbled about the new ownership, the management structure, and their ridiculous policies at every Sunday dinner. The same Sunday dinners I stopped going to 4 months ago because, well, I was too busy at work. So, 2 weeks ago, when Mom called to invite me to Thanksgiving, I'd already made a call of my own. I'd told Andrew Collins, the CEO of Stratton Global, I need a favor. Sitting there, as my father slowly, publicly, shredded me in front of my entire family, I checked my watch again. 7:05 p.m. 2 minutes. You know what your problem is, Ethan? Dad continued, his voice dripping with condescension. You never learned the value of hard work. We gave you everything. You're almost 32 years old, you drive a 12-year-old Honda, you rent an apartment. You went to college and came back thinking you were too good for honest labor. You don't even have a girlfriend, because what woman wants a man who can't provide? You're a disappointment, Ethan. Someone had to say it. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Aunt Sarah looked horrified. Mom's eyes welled up with tears. Uncle John looked utterly uncomfortable. Chris and Michael both stared at their plates, but my father, he just sat there, satisfied, like he'd done me a favor by publicly humiliating me. I smiled. The easiest, most genuine smile I'd worn all evening. Interesting, I said quietly. 7:06 p.m. 1 minute. What's interesting? Dad snapped. Your definition of success, I replied. The assumption that because you don't understand what I do, it must not be valuable. I understand exactly what you do.
Dad declared.
Nothing. Dad, come on, Michael interjected, trying to ease the tension. That's enough. No, it's fine, I said, still smiling. Let him speak. I want everyone to hear this. Dad's face darkened. You think you're smart because you went to college? Because you use big words? Let me tell you something. Ding dong. The doorbell. Everyone froze. Who is that? Mom whispered, looking puzzled. Everyone's here. I invited someone, I said, almost nonchalantly, checking my watch one last time. 7:07 p.m. Right on time. Hope that's all right, Mom. You invited someone? Dad's voice dripped with disdain.
Great.
Probably one of your jobless coffee shop pals. I rose. I'll get it. Sit down. I'll get it. Mom said, already standing.
No, Mom.
Let me. I walked to the door and opened it. Andrew Collins, 52, stood on our front porch. He was wearing a fitted charcoal suit that probably cost more than my Honda. He looked like he'd just stepped out of a Forbes magazine shoot. Silver hair, sharp features, a commanding presence. Behind him stood Rachel Harris, our CFO, in a stunning burgundy dress, and Victoria Bennett, our VP of Operations, in a sleek black pantsuit. Good evening, Ethan, Andrew said cordially. We apologize for being late. Interstate 5 was a nightmare. No problem at all, I replied. Come in. I led them into the dining room. Andrew carried an expensive bottle of wine. Rachel had a beautiful bouquet of flowers. Victoria held a covered dish that smelled like honey-glazed ham. Every single eye in the room followed them. "Everyone," I announced. "These are Andrew Collins, Rachel Harris, and Victoria Bennett. They work with me." Mom looked bewildered, but polite. "Oh, how sweet. Please sit down. We have plenty of food." Dad barely glanced up. "So, these are the consulting guys." "Sure. Find a spot." Andrew's eyes scanned the table, then landed on me. And in that instant, his entire demeanor changed. From pleasant to something between shock and utter dread. His back straightened, his smile evaporated. "Sir," he said, his tone suddenly serious, respectful, almost deferential. "I didn't know. You mentioned family dinner. I didn't know." He paused, looked around the table, then back at me, and actually bowed slightly. "Mister? I apologize for the intrusion, Parker. If I had known this was your family, I would have." "It's all right, Andrew," I interrupted gently. "Everyone, this is Andrew Collins. He's the CEO of Stratton Global Industries." Uncle David's fork clattered onto his plate. "And this is Rachel Harris, our Chief Financial Officer," I continued, "and Victoria Bennett, our Vice President of Operations for North American Divisions." Chris's face began to lose all color. Michael stared at me, his mouth agape. Dad just sat there, fork halfway to his mouth, utterly motionless. "Wait," Uncle John whispered. "Stratton Global? That's the corporation that acquired Parker and Sons." "That's correct," I said, returning to my chair. 6 months ago. A $5 million acquisition. Part of Stratton's strategic expansion into Pacific Northwest construction services. Everyone turned to stare at my father. His face cycled from red to white to a pasty gray. "Dad works there now," I added casually. "How's the new management treating you, by the way? I heard some restructuring announcements were coming next month." Andrew caught on immediately. I watched the realization dawn in his eyes, and his face shifted from professional to something much colder, more calculating. "Mr. Robert Parker," Andrew began, his voice bland but with an undeniable edge. "I wasn't aware you were related to our top strategy officer. The man who designed the entire acquisition. The man who has ultimate say on division budgets, hiring decisions, and operational restructuring." The hush was absolute. My father stammered. "Wait, Ethan, you're—" His voice broke. "You're my boss's boss's boss?" "Yes." Rachel leaned over and whispered something to Andrew, who nodded slowly, his gaze never leaving my father. "Mr. Parker," Andrew continued, "I've been reviewing the Q3 performance reports. Your division, the historic Parker and Sons contracts, has underperformed expectations. Margins are down 14%. There's been debate about eliminating superfluous personnel in that section." "Redundant." Dad's voice was barely a whisper. "But of course," Andrew said, still looking at me, "I'm sure your son wouldn't want us to make any hurried judgments concerning his father's career. Would you, Ethan?" Everyone in the room was staring at me now, waiting. My mother's hand was clamped over her mouth. Chris looked like he wanted to melt into his chair. Michael's face was utterly pale. Aunt Sarah's eyes were wide, a mixture of dread and morbid interest. I took another sip of wine. Let the moment hang. Let them all sit in it. "Tell me, Dad," I finally murmured, setting down my glass. "What was it you were saying about real work?" His lips opened and closed, no sound coming out. "Because I'm trying to understand," I continued, my voice calm, almost compassionate. "I want to make sure I have this right. Construction is a real job. Building things with your hands is valuable. But strategic consultancy, supply chain optimization, digital transformation, that's nothing. That's a sham. Is that accurate?" Dad's Adam's apple bobbed. He couldn't form words. "Here's what I find intriguing," I went on. "The reason Parker and Sons was losing money, the reason you were heading straight for bankruptcy, was because your project management was stuck in 1995. You were still using paper requisition forms, Excel spreadsheets to track inventories. You were losing thousands of dollars every single job because no one knew where your materials were or when they'd arrive." Andrew nodded. "The due diligence report was extensive." So when Stratton acquired you, I continued. What did they do? They hired consultants. People like me. People who use laptops in coffee shops and create PowerPoint presentations. And do you know what happened? My father was staring at me, and I couldn't read his expression. Shock. Fear? Embarrassment? Your division's margins increased by 8% in the first quarter under new management. All, I said, letting the words hang, because someone implemented the kind of pretend work you just mocked me for doing. Victoria spoke up. The digital inventory system alone saved $150,000 in Q3. But that's not real work, right, Dad? I slowly stood up. Let me tell you what real work is. Real work is spending 6 years building a company from nothing. Working 100-hour weeks to prove a concept everyone said was stupid. Earning every single client through results, not inheritance.
Chris blanched at that.
Real work, I added, my voice growing stronger, is transforming a failing company concept into a lucrative acquisition. Managing 52 direct reports across 6 states is real work. Sitting in boardrooms, making decisions that impact thousands of families, including yours, that's real work. The room was so silent I could hear the kitchen clock ticking. But you're right about one thing, I said, my voice softening slightly. I drive a 12-year-old Honda because I don't have anything to prove with a car. I rent an apartment because I travel 40 weeks a year, and it seems silly to buy a house I'd never live in. And I don't have a partner because I've been too busy pursuing the career you just informed me doesn't exist. My mother was openly weeping now, tears streaming down her face. I turned to Andrew, Rachel, and Victoria. Thank you for coming, but I think we should leave. I'm not hungry anymore. Of course, sir, Andrew said, rising instantly. Rachel and Victoria followed suit. As I headed for the door, my father finally found his voice. Wait, Ethan, please. I stopped dead in my tracks. Slowly, gently, I turned back. Yes, you did, Dad. You always mean it. That's the problem. I was trying to inspire you, motivate you. I laughed, but it came out bitter. Dad, I sold my company for $50 million. I also have ownership in Stratton Global worth $15 million. I made more last year than you will in your entire lifetime. But none of it matters to you, does it? Because I don't use a hammer. Uncle John had his face in his hands. Aunt Sarah was staring at me like she'd never seen me before. Chris and Michael both looked sick. I didn't tell you any of this, I said, my voice becoming steadier, because I wanted you to be proud of me for who I am, not what I produce. But you can't do that. You can't see beyond your own narrow definition of success to acknowledge that your son might have achieved anything. Ethan, please, my mother pleaded gently. Don't leave like this. I'm sorry, Mom, but I can't sit at a table where I'm openly mocked for my career while the CEO of a billion-dollar company literally bows to me. I glanced at my father one last time. He was smaller, shrunk. The man who had always seemed so enormous, so certain, so righteous, suddenly looked old, confused, and utterly insignificant. You want to know why I don't come to Sunday dinners anymore, Dad?
Here's why.
Because no matter what I do, it will never be enough for you. So, I quit trying. Andrew unlocked the front door, and the cold November air surged in. Sir, he asked gently, are you sure about this? My father was at the head of the table, his head in his hands. My mother was sobbing silently. Chris stared at his plate, and Michael looked at me with an apology in his eyes. Yes, I answered. I'm certain. We walked out to the driveway. Andrew's black Mercedes and Rachel's Audi were parked right next to my 12-year-old Honda Accord. I'm sorry you had to see that, I told them. Don't be, Rachel said firmly. He deserved it. Still, I sighed. Family is complicated. Speaking of which, Andrew said cautiously, about those restructuring plans for the Parker and Sons subsidiary. Don't fire him. I cut him off immediately. Andrew raised an eyebrow. Don't fire my dad or my brothers, I clarified. Keep them right where they are. Same position, same pay. Ethan, your dad just... I understand what he did. I said. But my mother doesn't deserve to lose her house because her husband is a stubborn fool. And my brothers have spouses, children, and mortgages. I didn't do this to ruin their finances. I did it to make a point. What was the point? Victoria wondered. That success isn't one size fits all. That real work comes in many forms. And that maybe, just maybe, he should have believed in his son. Andrew gave me a long look, then grinned slightly. You're a better man than I would be in your position. Maybe, I replied. Or maybe I'm just weary of being furious. For what it's worth, Rachel added, your father was wrong. What you created was remarkable. The acquisition netted Stratton $53 million in the first year alone. When Andrew retires, the board refers to you as the heir apparent. I appreciate it. Although, Andrew chuckled, you probably could have told us this was your family before we walked into an ambush. Where's the fun in that? I grinned back. We talked for a few more minutes about work, Q4 estimates, the Christmas party next month, normal, professional topics. The kind of conversation I had every day with people who actually valued what I did. They left around 7:35 p.m. I sat in my Honda for a long time, just admiring the warm light spilling from my parents' home, listening to the muted sounds of conversation within. My phone vibrated. A text from Michael.
Can we talk?
I typed back. Not tonight. Another buzz.
Chris, I'm sorry.
I should have said something. I didn't reply to that one. A third buzz. My mom. Please come back inside. Your father wants to talk. I started the engine and drove off. The next day, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. I ignored most of the calls, but eventually, I listened to the voicemails. My father's voice, shaking.
Hey, Ethan. I'm not sure what to say.
I was wrong. I was wrong. Please call me back. We need to talk. My mother. Sweetheart, your dad is distraught. He's been up all night. Please, give him an opportunity to apologize properly. Uncle John. Hello, Ethan. Listen, your father called me this morning.
He's a disaster.
I know he was harsh on you yesterday, but give him some slack.
He's proud, you know.
It's difficult for guys like us to confess our mistakes. I deleted them all. A week later, my father showed up at my office. Gloria Martinez, my executive assistant with 28 years of experience, who managed my calendar like a military operation, buzzed me. Mr. Parker, there's a Robert Parker here to see you. He does not have an appointment. Send him in. My father stepped into my office and paused. He just paused and stared. My office was on the 47th floor of the Columbia Center in Seattle, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Puget Sound, original artwork on the walls, and a custom-made desk from Italy. It was all tailored to reflect exactly what I had accomplished. Jesus, he muttered. Have a seat, Dad. He sat in one of the leather chairs across from my desk, looking tiny and out of place with his work boots on the polished hardwood floor, his plaid shirt in a space built for suits and silk ties. I came to apologize, he said. Okay. Just okay? Dad, what do you want me to say? That everything's okay and that you didn't spend 32 years making me feel inadequate. He flinched. I never meant. Yes, you did. You absolutely meant it. Every time you introduced me to someone as my son, the consultant, in that tone, as if it were a dirty word. Every time you complimented Chris and Michael on their real jobs while dismissing my efforts. You always made it plain that until I was working with my hands, I wasn't really working. I didn't understand what you were doing, he said gently. You didn't strive to understand. There's a difference. He remained quiet for a long time. You're right, he finally said. I didn't try. I was threatened. I felt intimidated by you, by what you were doing, by the fact that you were entering a world I couldn't follow. He massaged his face with both hands. Your brothers, they're doing what I did. Building. I get it. I can give them advice, share my expertise. But you went someplace I couldn't go. And instead of taking pride in that, I was unkind. Yeah, I finished for him. You were cruel. I leaned back in my chair, staring at this man who, as a boy, had seemed like a giant to me, so powerful and sure of himself. Now he just looked exhausted. Did you know?
I asked.
On my 16th birthday, you told me I'd never amount to anything because I preferred reading to working on construction sites. He didn't say anything. Or, when I got accepted to UW with a scholarship, you said college was a waste of time for someone like me. I was wrong. Or, when I told you about my first client, you laughed and said I'd be bankrupt in 6 months. He just sat there, taking it. I kept waiting. I continued, my voice now laced with the ache of decades. Waiting for the day you'd finally say, I'm proud of you, son. But it never came. Not when I got my 50th client. Not when Forbes featured my firm in an article on innovative companies. Not when I sold the company for enough money to retire at 30. Nothing I accomplished was ever enough. Because I'm an idiot, he answered slowly. Because I'm a stupid, stubborn old man who doesn't know how to say the things he should say. That's not good enough, Dad. I know. He looked at me, his eyes burning. I know it isn't. But I'm going to say it anyway. I am proud of you. I'm proud of what you created. I'm proud of the man you've become. And I apologize. I'm really sorry I waited until you humiliated me in front of the entire family before admitting it. The hush stretched between us again. What do you want from me? I asked finally. A chance, he said. A chance to do better. To be better. To actually be the father you deserved instead of the one you got. I stared out the window at the Seattle cityscape, the gray waters of Puget Sound, the mountains in the distance. I don't know if I can do that, I said honestly. I don't know if I can just forgive 32 years because you finally realized you were wrong. I'm not asking for forgiveness. Not yet. I'm only asking for an opportunity to earn it. I turned back to face him. What does that look like? I don't know. Maybe Sunday meals. For you and me. Just us. No brothers, no uncles, no audience. Just two people eating and talking. I'd want to hear about your work. Really. Not to judge it. I want to understand what my son does. And if I say no, I'll understand. But I'll keep trying. Because you're my son and I love you. And I should have said that a hell of a lot more than I did. I sat with it for a while. One dinner, I finally answered. One Sunday dinner. You ask real questions. You truly listen. You don't compare what I do to construction or say I should do something different. If you can do that, if you can get through one meal without making me feel inadequate, maybe we can try again. He nodded, a relieved expression on his face. I can do that. And Dad, I said, my voice hardening slightly, if you embarrass me like that again, we're done. I don't care if you're family. I don't care if Mom begs. We're finished. Understood. Understood. He stood to go, then paused at the door. That thing you said at Thanksgiving, he recalled, about making more last year than I'll make in my career. How about it? Was it true? Yeah, I said. It was true. He nodded slowly. Jesus. Well, good for you, son. Sincerely. Good for you. After he left, I stayed in my office for a while, watching the sun set over the ocean. Gloria buzzed me. Mr. Parker, it's 4 p.m. is here. Send them in. And I returned to work. My father, it seemed, might finally be learning to appreciate this type of work. 3 months later, I was enjoying Sunday dinner with my father at a quiet Italian restaurant in Fremont. We'd been doing this every week since that day in my office. The first dinner was stiff, awkward. The second, marginally better. And by the fourth, we were actually conversing. Tell me about the Benson project, he asked, cutting his chicken marsala. I couldn't share individual contracts due to confidentiality, of course, but I started discussing basic principles, describing how supply chain optimization works, leading him through the tactics we utilized. It's interesting, he said after I described how we tackled a particularly challenging logistical problem. I never considered it that way. The timing of delivery, storage costs, labor schedules, it's all connected. That's exactly it, I said. Everything links. One delay causes a chain reaction of problems. We could have used someone like you at Parker and Sons 20 years ago. You had someone like me, I continued gently, but you just didn't listen. He set down his fork. You're correct. You tried to inform me about inefficiencies in our supply chain when you were 22, right? 23, the summer after I graduated. And I ordered you to shut up and let the men who understood what they were doing handle it.
He sighed. Yeah.
I apologize. I understand. We ate silently for a time. Then he asked, "Are you happy?" The question surprised me.
What?
With everything? My life, my career? I thought about it. Yes, I think I am. It's difficult and sometimes taxing, but I enjoy what I do. I enjoy problem solving, creating systems, and making things more efficient. That's excellent, he responded. All I ever wanted was for you boys to be happy. I just had a dumb, restricted image of what happiness should be like. Do you know what made me happy? I said. Last week, you inquired about my work without passing judgment. I was happy that you listened to my explanation without attempting to connect it to building. He grinned. A genuine smile, not the artificial ones he'd always worn before. Then I'll keep doing that. 6 months after Thanksgiving, my mother called. Ethan, honey, would you want to come to Sunday dinner? Not at the restaurant. Here at home. I don't know, Mom. Chris and Michael want to apologize properly. Your father spoke to them. Really talked to them. They realize now what they did wrong. She paused. Please, she pleaded, give them a chance. Like you gave your father a chance. So I went. When I arrived, Chris and Michael were waiting in the living room, both standing. Hey, Chris began hesitantly. Thanks for coming. What is this about? We're sorry, Michael replied, for Thanksgiving and all the other times. For treating you as if your accomplishment wasn't important because it wasn't construction. We've been talking to Dad, Chris added, about what you do, about what you built. And we realized we were. Yes, I finished for them. You were. We'd like to change that, Michael said, if you'll let us. I looked at my brothers, both in their early 30s with kids, visibly uncomfortable, but genuinely trying hard. Okay, I responded finally. We can try. We had dinner. And while there were awkward silences and moments of stress, it was better. It was different. As I was leaving, my father walked me to my car. Thank you, he said, for coming tonight. For giving them a chance. Don't thank me yet. Let's see if they genuinely change.
They will, he said.
Because they saw what I almost lost. He took a breath. I almost lost my son because I was too stubborn to admit I was wrong. They don't want to make the same mistake. I got into my car, but didn't immediately start the engine. Dad. Yeah. How did you feel when Andrew stepped in on Thanksgiving and addressed me as sir? He was silent for a long time. Then, shame. Completely unbearable shame. Because at that point, I realized I knew nothing about my own son, while everyone else witnessed what you'd accomplished. But I was so preoccupied evaluating you that I never even looked. Good, I answered. Do you remember that feeling? Because if you ever make me feel little again, that's where we'll wind up. With you knowing nothing about me, because I won't give you the opportunity. I understand. I drove home thinking about how bizarre it was that the moment designed to disgrace my father had instead begun to restore our relationship. That the worst Thanksgiving of my life resulted in the finest 6 months. A year after that dinner, Andrew announced his retirement. Have you ever had a moment of intense vindication, where everything just clicks into place and you finally feel seen? Or maybe you've had to navigate a really complicated family dynamic where the path to understanding felt impossible. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. What would you have done in my place? Let me know in the comments below.